Today on the bench have one of my favorite radios. Well, not so much favorite radios, but one of my favorite chassis, a PLL-02A Cybernet chassis. This is a Lafayette Telsat SSB-140. Actually, have two of them for the same customer. Guess he got a package deal on them. I'll reach around here and grab the other one here. Get around my camera. So here's another one. Same radio. The other one just needed electrolytic capacitors replaced. It does. I've not done it to that one yet. It does need a driver and a final. This one, the top cover was actually, I got to try and get that off, but somebody wrote on it with a Sharpie, from the looks of it, parts. And you open it up, yeah, it was definitely had started to been parted out. For starters, the VCO can was not in the radio. It was actually, he had it in a box, you know, out external to the radio. And he had told me ahead of time there was also no power supply. So the power supply, the entire power supply board was gone. The transformer was still in the radio, but the power supply was, board was missing. So he wanted to try and get at least one good working radio. So the other one, like I say, it's got low power, but everything else was fine in it. So that one basically just needed recapped, which I've already done. And like I say, tried to do the alignment, the output power. It's just almost there, but not quite. But I know why. Both of these he got from the same person, and I'm assuming either that person or whoever that person got these radios from, they were both owned by the same person who used them at one point in time, and they had a power supply cranked up on them. The power supply in the other radio was cranked up to the maximum. And that's probably what and people do that in an attempt. Well, it's not an attempt. They succeed. You end up getting more power out of your radio. It will, your PA section or the amplifier will make more power. You'll have more output power. The problem is, for how long? Kind of like you got a car. Just go to the dealership, buy an everyday average car, and you go home and stick a 300 horsepower nitrous kit on it. Stock engine, didn't change the camshaft, didn't change the crank, didn't put new push rods, pistons, just a stock engine, and you put a 300 horsepower nitrous kit on it. How long do you think the engine's going to last? Probably not too long. Radios are no different. Same thing. You're putting more power into it. You crank the voltage up on this thing. The radio, you've now trying to get more power out of the radio. Well, you're not trying, you are. You're getting more power out of the radio, but it's more than it was designed to do. And eventually, parts go bad. You start to cook stuff. Now, this one, like I say, the VCO can was bad. The power supply was missing. Probably burned that up. I did power it up with an external power supply, because remember, this has AC and DC inputs on the back. And one of the first things I noticed was, it wasn't on very long, and I had the volume turned down the whole way, and luckily, I just happened to brush against this aluminum plate right here. Well, that's the heat sink for the audio amplifier. And yeah, I'm lucky I didn't come away with a blister from that critter, because man, was it ever hot. Yeah, it was shorted. Which is probably what may have taken out the power supply in the original one. And if the power supply in the original one was anything like the one in the other one, they had the wrong fuses. Again, people, the fuse ratings on radios are there for a reason. The fuses are here to protect this radio. If something happens inside of this radio, the fuse is supposed to blow before parts start, going up in smoke. And so, yeah, they had the 1 amp fuse on the back, was a 2 amp fuse, and then the fuse on the power, as you can see, this was just bodged in. So apparently they blew the original fuse, and then they just bodged in a normal fuse. They didn't use a proper pigtail fuse, and that was larger than it was supposed to be. So I'm assuming the power supply that was probably in this, or was in it originally, they'd probably done the same thing, larger fuses. Actually, the fuse and the fuse holder on the back was too big. It was a 2 amp fuse as well in this one. So yeah, don't go cheap. If you're blowing fuses, you've got problems. So, yeah, the audio amp was shorted. And again, crank the voltage up. You're not just cranking the voltage up. When you turn the voltage up on your power supply, you're not just turning it up for, let's say, more output power. You've now increased the voltage to every single component in this radio, with the exception, and that depends from radio to radio, on voltage regulators. Because different radios may have, and even nowadays, from 3 or 5, 7, 8, 9, 12 volt regulators. Those circuits might be protected from overvoltage only because they have a separate voltage regulator. But yeah, a lot of these circuits, they're running right off power supply voltage. So you go cranking the voltage up, you overvolt parts. And you have to remember, a lot of the electrolytic capacitors in these radios, original from the factory, they're going to be fairly low voltage. A lot of times you'll see a 16 or a 25 volt cap in there. Well, with power line surges, or if, even in a mobile radio, same thing. In a mobile radio, it's hooked up to an alternator, your voltage, you can get power surges. Same thing here, you can get power surges, you get spikes. Well, if you've cranked the voltage up already, you're running really close to that capacitor's maximum voltage rating, and then on top of that, it's going to get voltage spikes, and you eventually just end up cooking capacitors. So yeah, turning the voltage up, bad idea. So this one now works just like it's supposed to. It's a good working radio again. I put in a proper Cybernet power supply board. So this has been replaced. This came out of, I'm not really sure, because these power supply boards were actually used in, God, I don't have enough fingers and toes to count how many radios use this power supply board. Pretty much a lot, actually not even just the single board Cybernet chassis, the one that used the dual stacked boards used this same power supply module as well. Very popular in Cybernets. So got lots of these. So I just rebuilt one of these, stuck it in this radio. The wires were still on the underside. They just needed to be hooked up. So that works fine. Like I said, the VCO can was bad. Asked the customer, gave them an option. I said, I can rebuild this. I've done separate videos on how to rebuild these. You have to very carefully cut down each side of them, pretend you're a dentist for a while with a Dremel tool and basically burrow into the seal. Cause remember, these things are potted in epoxy, but you have to cut into them and replace the electrolytic capacitor in here. And I always change the varactor diodes in these cans because that's usually what actually goes bad, be it this one or the little small ones, the ones that are about that big. But I gave them the option, rebuild this one, or I could just install a new modern one. So there is a company in the United Kingdom, Spectrum Communications. I'm sure some of you are familiar with them. They've been making these things for years, and I've been using them, and they work just fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. They make replacement VCO modules, so that's what we have right there. There's the modern replacement, fresh from London, England, which is where they're located. So yeah, put that in. Synthesizer circuit popped back to life, everything fine and dandy and ready to go. Other than that, just repaired a couple cut circuit traces for the PLL, because both of these radios at one time had channel modifications. The other one still had the channel mod installed with 2 switches on the back. This one didn't have any switches, but the tracks were cut to the PLL, so those were repaired. So this is now a stock 40-channel radio, and a good working radio. And most importantly, with a power supply that is properly set to 13.8 volts, with a proper fuse down here and a proper fuse in the back of the radio. Also, like I say, this one also got a brand new audio amplifier, so the audio amp was replaced. And again, the driver and the final in this thing, so those were both replaced. Since I put in a replacement power supply module, not knowing what this power supply may have come out of, because it was just one I pulled out of a parts chassis and put into inventory. They're cheap. Whenever I stick those in, used power supply modules, I always replace the main regulator transistor, so that was replaced in here as well. Other than that, replaced the electrolytic capacitors and an alignment. It's back to working exactly the way it should. Fantastic receivers, as the Cybernets are. Like I said, I prefer these over the Unitons a little bit. I think they have a little bit better sensitivity. It is quantitative, meaning you can measure the difference with instruments, but probably in person, set, let's say, a Uniden UPD-858 chassis radio beside one of the Cybernet PLL02A chassis, it's probably subjective. Personal preference, how they sound. I prefer the receivers on these radios a little bit better. Now, honestly, the Unidens probably have, if you're going for more audio punch, the UPD-858 chassis probably has a little bit better audio punch because of the clipper circuit they use in the microphone amplifier stages and that. They do have really good audio. Don't get me wrong, this is no slouch, but I think they sound a little bit better on air. But yeah, if I had a choice, I'd take one of these. I'm a receiver sensitivity nut. The only other thing I did to this, these radios are known for doing it actually a lot of the Cybernets and Unidens. So this isn't just something that affects this radio, this chassis. Anything from Cybernet could be anything from Uniden, and one radio will do it and the won't next. And what that is vibrating transformer. And the transformer that vibrates is this one right here. So this is your audio transformer. Now, just listening to stuff on a speaker, you'll never hear anything. But when you're talking especially when you're in AM, the modulation, or the audio that is modulating your AM carrier, that's coming through this transformer. And if there's any shrinkage whatsoever of this plastic form that the transformer is wrapped on, and like I say, that's just kind of a artifact, or not an artifact of, but it's just a common problem with transformers like this in any CB radio. At really high levels, you have high audio output levels. It's not uncommon for these things to vibrate, and this one was no exception. It vibrated. Now it's fairly easy to knock it down. You'll never get rid of it, but it's fairly easy to knock that vibration down. Just take a little bit of some type of like silicone or a rubbery type glue. I use the Loctite Go-To glue. I love this stuff. Just run a little bit of that, right along here, along the top. Basically what you're trying to do is bond the transformer here to the actual steel core. And then I add a few pieces of, it's a rather rigid, but it's a foam. Adhesive backed foam. I just cut out pieces of that, a little piece to stick on the top and a little piece here on the side. Kind of acts as like a dampening agent, I guess you could say. But that helps to cut down on that vibration. It'll still vibrate, but it won't. Once you put the cover back on the radio, it's not at a level where you'll really notice it. So, if you have a singing transformer, that is something you can do to help try and deaden that noise. A little bit of glue, a little bit of, something rubbery. If you have some cork or something you can glue to it, that'll help to dampen the vibration, because that's all it is. And it's easy to tell. Take the cover off your radio, just set your finger on it. You'll feel it vibrating. And what you want to do is try and absorb that vibration. That's what the glue and the foam's doing. It's just acting basically like a shock absorber to help absorb some of that vibration. So, only thing I really have left to do to this one is a final cleanup on it. It looks like at some point in time someone had, for some reason, gotten into this section of the wiring harness. So they use basically what I call dental floss to wire wrap these. Actually, you can see it here. It's a wax impregnated string, and they're tied. You can see, like back here, it's still nice and neat. So yeah, for some reason, from here to here, it's been removed. So, and I'll use the same thing. Actually, it's what I use is dental floss. Actually, it makes a great wire wrap. So yeah, I'll restring that right there to bind that all back up so it's like original. Give it a final cleaning. Pull the knobs off. Plop them in the ultrasonic cleaner for a really good cleaning, and this radio be ready to put back into service. The speaker grill's a little bit dirty, but otherwise, yeah, it's got one little nick right here, and the other one's in about the same condition. It's pretty good condition, other than the bottom covers both have a little dent in the corner, and the other radio, the original top cover, the corner is crinkled in the back corner, so I'm assuming it got damaged in shipping. People have a bad habit when they ship radio. Now, I know it wasn't the customer that did that. It was probably either who shipped it to him or somebody previous. But yeah, I guess it got damaged in shipping, so I need to try and straighten that. Luckily, it's just at the bottom back corner, like back here, so I should be able to get that flattened out pretty good so it's not noticeable. So there you go. There's a Lafayette Telsat SSB-140, brought back to life again.